May 4th Visitor Center, the day the war came home. On April 30th, 1970, President Richard Nixon announced that U.S. troops had invaded Cambodia. Students viewed this as an escalation of the Vietnam War, when Nixon had vowed troop withdrawal. Like students nationwide, Kent State students protested. On May 1st, they symbolically buried the U.S. Constitution, saying Nixon had murdered it. Black United students rallied to discuss harsh treatment of demonstrators elsewhere and warned members to avoid campus gatherings. On May 4th, Ohio National Guard troops advanced on a protest rally. 20 minutes later, Guardsmen killed 4 students and wounded 9 others. College students nationwide reacted with the largest student protest strike in U.S. history. From Vietnam to Cambodia, from Los Angeles to Memphis, from Kent State to Watergate, the American spirit suffered under one shock after another, and the confidence of our people was deeply shaken. President Jimmy Carter. ROTC building site, by any means necessary. Following a disturbance in downtown Kent on Friday, May 1st, 1970, the mayor asked that the Ohio National Guard be put on standby. On Saturday evening, the Guard accompanied firefighters who put out a fire in the ROTC building. Sunday morning, Governor Rhodes and public officials vowed to use any means necessary to maintain order, and 850 Guardsmen occupied the campus. Sunday afternoon, sightseers took souvenir photos of the troops. That evening, troops used tear gas and bayonets to disperse students staging a sit-in. The next day, May 4th, Guardsmen prepared to disperse a rally on the Commons. They were ordered to load their M1 rifles. "We are going to eradicate the problem. We are not going to treat the symptoms." Governor James Rhodes, May 3rd, 1970. Victory Bell, freedom of speech and assembly. By noon on May 4th, 2,000 to 3,000 people were assembled peacefully on this site, some to protest the escalation of the Vietnam War and the presence of the Ohio National Guard on campus. Most were observers. Others felt connected to the counterculture movement. Some were campus activists. All were exercising their First Amendment rights of freedom of speech and assembly. Meanwhile, 103 members and 10 officers of the Ohio National Guard lined up 500 feet away. Campus police officer Harold Rice repeated General Robert Canterbury's order to disperse. The demonstrators remained. General Canterbury ordered the Guard to advance. Top of Commons, law and order and dissent. Bearing rifles students did not know were loaded. Guardsmen advanced toward the crowd. People walked or ran ahead. Troops fired tear gas, which dissipated in the wind and open area. Several demonstrators threw back canisters. Company C moved toward the Prentice side of Taylor Hall. This is Taylor Hall. Guardsmen aimed rifles at a young man who reportedly threw rocks. Company C blocked the passage between Taylor and Prentice. Troop G and Company A followed the larger part of the crowd up Blanket Hill between Taylor and Johnson. At about 12:10 p.m., the rally on the Commons was dispersed. The Guardsmen continued marching beyond Taylor Hall. These students will have to learn what law and order is all about. General Robert Canterbury, noon, May 4th, 1970. Further tragedy averted. Immediately after the shootings, 300 people reassembled in protest at the Victory Bell. When the Guard made clear that protesters must move, they staged a sit-in on the slope by the Stouffer Johnson basketball court. Faculty Marshal Glenn Frank prevented Major Jones from advancing with his troops. In anguish, Frank pleaded with the students, "I don't care whether you've never listened to anyone before in your lives. I am begging you right now. If you don't disperse right now, they're going to move in, and it can only be a slaughter." The students quietly followed Glenn Frank across the Commons. Martin Luther King would not have stayed. Martin Luther King was a man who understood that to win you must live. There are too many of you who are too damn good to die in this stinking field here. Mike Lunine, faculty marshal, to students at the sit-in. Four students were killed: Allison Krauss, Jeffrey Miller, Sandra Schuer, and William Schroeder. Schrader. 9 students were wounded: Alan Canfora, John Cleary, Thomas Grace, Dean Collar, Joseph Lewis, D. Scott McKenzie, James Russell, Robert Stamps, and Douglas Rentmore. Demonstrators and spectators left the Commons and moved off in various directions. Students continued to pass by Taylor Hall on their way to class. Troop G and Company A marched to the practice field. They stayed there for 10 minutes. Some knelt and aimed at a dozen vocal demonstrators 150 to 200 feet away in the Prentice Hall parking lot. Student Alan Canfora waved a protest flag at the guard. Leaving Company C, stationed between Taylor and Prentice, Major Jones easily walked past demonstrators to the practice field. General Canterbury conferred with Jones and other officers. Canterbury then ordered the troops to retrace their steps up the hill and back to the ROTC site on the Commons. 13 seconds. As the guards marched back up the hill, members of Troop G clustered and looked back toward Prentice Hall parking lot. At 12:24 p.m., the troops reached the pagoda. Guardsmen on the trailing edge of the right flank, mostly from G Troop, wheeled 135 degrees in unison to face the parking lot. In the next 13 seconds, 28 guardsmen fired 67 shots. The guardsmen killed 4 Kent State students and wounded 9 others. The closest wounded student, Joseph Lewis, was 60 feet away. John Cleary, 111 feet away, fell near the solar totem sculpture, which still bears a bullet hole. James Russell, 390 feet away, was the only one wounded outside of the angle of fire leading to the parking lot. Prentice Hall parking lot, 4 dead and 9 wounded. On May 4th, 1970, at 12:24 p.m., 28 members of the Ohio National Guard fired for 13 seconds toward this parking lot at demonstrators, spectators, and passers-by. Fatally shot were Allison Krause, Jeffrey Miller, Sandra Schur, and William Schrader. They stood 270 to 390 feet away from the guard. Memorial markers show where they fell.